The first ships came without warning on a Tuesday morning in late September. Danny Cole was drinking coffee on his porch in the Colorado mountains when the sky turned orange. He watched 3 massive shadows pass over the sun. Each one was bigger than any aircraft he had ever seen during his 12 years in the Marines. Within minutes, his phone buzzed with emergency alerts. Then, the alerts stopped. The cell towers went dead. The power followed seconds later. Danny went inside and turned on his battery-powered radio. The reports were chaos. New York was burning. Los Angeles had gone silent. Washington was under attack. Military bases across the country were being hit by something from the sky. The announcer's voice shook as he described creatures in armor dropping from the clouds. Then that station went dead too. Danny grabbed his rifle and his go bag. He had prepared for disasters his whole life. He never thought the disaster would come from space. The Vrexan Empire had conquered 47 worlds across 3 galaxies. Their soldiers were tall and thin with gray skin and 4 eyes. They moved in perfect formation and carried weapons that could level buildings. Their commanders looked at Earth and saw another easy victory. A primitive world with primitive weapons. The conquest would take perhaps 10 days. They were wrong. Danny drove his truck down the mountain toward the old mining facility where he had stored supplies years ago. Along the way, he found others. Lisa Grant was walking on the road with a medical bag over her shoulder. She had been a combat medic in the Army and was visiting family when the attack began. Her family was gone now. She climbed into Danny's truck without a word. Kevin Price was hiding in a gas station with his younger sister. He was only 22, a mechanic who worked on trucks and tractors. His hands were shaking, but his eyes were steady. He had seen the alien soldiers march through his town. He had seen what they did to people who ran. He wanted to fight. By nightfall, Danny had gathered 31 survivors at the mining facility. Some were soldiers like him. Most were not. There were teachers and farmers and store clerks. There was an old woman named Carol Webb who said she used to fly jets for the Air Force. There was a quiet man named Nick Torres, who had worked in communications for a tech company. Danny looked at them all and saw fear. But he also saw something else. He saw anger. These people had lost everything in a single day. They wanted revenge. He stood on a wooden crate and spoke to them. His voice was calm and hard. "I'm not going to lie to you," Danny said. "The world we knew is gone. These things came from somewhere out there, and they think they can take our planet. They think we're weak. They think we'll run and hide and wait to die." He paused and looked at their faces. "They're wrong. Humans don't quit. We never have. We survived ice ages and plagues and wars that killed millions. We're still here, and we're going to make these invaders regret ever coming to Earth." The mining facility became their base. They had food and water for months. They had weapons from Danny's stockpile and more that survivors brought with them. Kevin Price got the generators working. Nick Torres rigged up a radio system to scan for other survivors. 3 days later, the Vrexan ground troops came. A patrol of 12 alien soldiers marched up the mountain road. They moved with confidence. Their armor gleamed in the morning sun. Their weapons hummed with energy. They had crushed human military units 10 times this size. A group of civilians hiding in the mountains would be simple. Danny watched them through his rifle scope. He had positioned his people in the rocks above the road. They were not trained soldiers, but they knew these mountains, and they were fighting for their lives. "Wait for my signal," Danny whispered into his radio. The aliens walked closer. 200 meters, 100 meters, 50 meters. Danny fired. His bullet hit the lead alien in the neck, finding the gap between helmet and chest plate. The creature dropped. In the same instant, 30 other guns opened fire from the rocks. The Vrexan soldiers were fast. They raised their weapons and returned fire. Energy bolts blasted chunks from the boulders. One of Danny's people screamed and fell. Another was thrown backward by an explosion, but the humans kept shooting. Lisa Grant crawled through the dirt to reach the wounded. She pulled a young man behind cover and pressed bandages to his chest. Her hands were steady even as alien fire cracked the air above her head. Kevin Price had built something in his workshop. It was crude and ugly. A metal box with wires sticking out. He pressed a button and threw it toward the aliens. The box sparked and popped. 2 of the alien weapons suddenly died. The soldiers holding them stared at their guns in confusion. Danny put bullets in both of them. The fight lasted 4 minutes. When it was over, 8 alien soldiers lay dead on the road. The other 4 ran. They actually ran. Danny watched them disappear down the mountain and felt something he had not felt since the invasion began: hope. That night, Nick Torres picked up transmissions from the captured alien equipment. He did not understand the language yet, but he recognized the tone. The aliens were scared. They were reporting contact with hostile humans who fought back. They were requesting support. "Good," Danny said. "Let them call for help. Let them know we're here." Carol Webb sat by the fire, cleaning a rifle she had not touched in 20 years. She looked up at Danny with eyes that had seen combat before. "This is just the beginning," she said. "They'll come back with more." "I know," Danny replied, "and we'll be ready." Across the country, similar scenes played out. In the swamps of Louisiana, hunters ambushed alien patrols. In the forests of Oregon, loggers used chainsaws and axes when their bullets ran out. In the suburbs of Texas, families fortified their homes and fought from windows and rooftops. The Vrexan Empire had conquered worlds where species surrendered after the first attack. They had conquered worlds where populations fled to the wilderness and starved. They had never conquered a world where every village, every town, every stretch of empty road became a battlefield. The humans were not organized. They were not coordinated. They were just people who refused to die quietly. And that refusal was something the aliens could not understand. In his command ship above the burning cities, the Vrexan general reviewed the first day's reports. The numbers troubled him. Losses were higher than projected. Human resistance was stronger than expected. The conquest timeline would need adjustment. He was not worried. Not yet. Earth would fall. All worlds fell eventually. But deep in the mountains of Colorado, Danny Cole was already planning his next attack. The sky had fallen. The world had changed. But humanity was still standing, and they were just getting started. 2 weeks passed after the first battle on the mountain road. Danny Cole's group had grown to nearly 80 people. Word spread through the wilderness. Survivors found their way to the mining facility. Some brought weapons. Some brought skills. All brought the same burning need to strike back. Nick Torres worked day and night on the alien communication device they had captured. It was a flat black box with symbols that glowed blue. At first, it made no sense. The language was clicks and hums that sounded like static. But Nick was patient. He recorded everything. He looked for patterns. He treated it like a puzzle. On the 14th day, he cracked it. "Danny," Nick called across the camp. "You need to hear this." Danny walked into the small room Nick had turned into a communication center. Wires hung from the ceiling. Screens showed nothing but green lines moving up and down. Nick pressed a button, and the alien voice filled the room. "I can translate about 60% now," Nick said. "It's not perfect. But listen to what they're saying." The alien voice spoke in that strange clicking language. Nick pointed to words he had written on paper. "They're scared," Nick said. "They keep talking about human attacks. They expected to control the whole continent by now. Instead, they're losing soldiers every day. Their timeline is falling apart." Danny felt that spark of hope again. "What else? They call us something. I think it translates to unbroken ones or maybe stubborn prey. They've never seen anything like us. Every other species they conquered gave up after the first wave. We didn't." Danny smiled. It was not a warm smile. "Good. Let's make sure they stay scared." While Nick worked on communications, Kevin Price worked on something else. He had dragged pieces of a destroyed alien walker back to his workshop. The walker was a machine the size of a car that moved on 4 legs. It carried heavy weapons and thick armor. One of them could wipe out a town. But Kevin had found something interesting inside. "Come look at this," Kevin said to Danny one morning. The workshop smelled like oil and burned metal. Parts of the walker lay spread across the floor like the bones of some mechanical animal. Kevin pointed to a glowing blue cylinder in the center. This is their power source, Kevin explained. It runs everything. Weapons, shields, movement. Without it, the whole machine is dead. Can we destroy it? Kevin grinned. Better than that. I think we can shut it down from a distance. He pulled out a notebook, covered in drawings and numbers. This thing runs on a specific frequency. A very specific frequency. And here's the funny part. Human technology can generate that exact frequency. Our old emergency broadcast systems, certain radio equipment, even modified car batteries. We can build devices that will kill their power from 50 meters away. Danny stared at the glowing cylinder. You're telling me we can turn off their machines? Not all of them. Not the big ships. But their ground equipment, their walkers, their personal shields. Yeah. We can shut them down. This changed everything. Lisa Grant brought her own discovery to Danny that same week. She had been treating wounded fighters and studying the alien bodies they had collected. The Vrexan soldiers were tall and intimidating. But up close they were surprisingly fragile. Their bones are light, Lisa said. Almost hollow. Like bird bones. Their muscles are weak compared to ours. I think they evolved on a low-gravity world. Here on Earth, they're actually struggling. That armor they wear isn't just protection, it's support. It helps them move. So without the armor, they're slow and clumsy. A healthy human is stronger than them in a straight fight. That's why they avoid close combat. They know they'll lose. Danny thought about this. The aliens had better weapons, better ships, better technology in every way. But they were physically weaker than humans, and their technology had a critical flaw that humans could exploit. For the first time since the invasion, Danny started to believe they could actually win. He gathered his key people that night. Danny, Lisa, Kevin, Nick, and Carol Webb sat around a map of the region. Candles provided the only light. Outside, guards watched the darkness for alien patrols. We need to share this information, Danny said. Every resistance group needs to know about the electromagnetic weakness. Every fighter needs to understand that these things can be beaten in close combat. I've been picking up other groups on the radio, Nick said. There are cells scattered across the country. Some are organized. Some are just families hiding in basements. If I can reach them, I can send instructions for building the devices Kevin designed. Carol Webb leaned forward. We need to do more than share information. We need to coordinate, hit them in multiple places at once, make them spread their forces thin. She's right, Lisa added. One group attacking is a nuisance. 50 groups attacking on the same night is a crisis. Danny nodded. This was exactly what he had been thinking. Nick, start reaching out to every group you can find. Kevin, write up simple instructions for the electromagnetic weapons. Make it easy enough that anyone with basic tools can build one. Over the next weeks, the network grew. Nick made contact with groups in Wyoming, Kansas, Nebraska, and beyond. Some had military training. Some had nothing but hunting rifles and determination. All of them wanted to fight. Kevin's instructions spread through the network. Soon, reports came back of alien walkers shutting down mid-patrol, enemy weapons going dead during firefights. The Vrexan forces were losing equipment faster than they could replace it. The aliens responded by increasing patrols. They burned forests where resistance fighters hid. They executed prisoners in public to spread fear. But the fear did not spread. Instead, it made the humans angrier. Danny led raids on alien supply lines. They hit fast and vanished into the mountains. Each raid brought more weapons, more equipment, and more intelligence. Lisa trained new medics, using alien medical supplies they captured. Kevin improved his devices, making them smaller and more powerful. One night, Nick intercepted a message that made everyone stop. The Vrexan commander is asking for reinforcements, Nick translated. He's telling his superiors that Earth is not under control. He says the humans are adapting faster than expected. He says they've never encountered resistance like this on any world. Carol laughed. It was the first time Danny had heard her laugh since the invasion. 47 worlds, she said. They conquered 47 worlds. And not one of them fought back like we are. Danny looked at his people. They were tired and dirty and scared. They had lost friends and family. They had seen their world burn. But they were still fighting. That's because they never invaded Earth before, Danny said. They never fought humans. Now, they're learning what that means. The next phase of the plan came together over the following days. Danny coordinated with resistance leaders across the region. They picked targets carefully. Alien command posts, supply depots, communication towers. Every target had a purpose. They set a date. One night. Dozens of attacks. Across the entire continent, the Vrexan Empire was about to learn that dropping on Earth was the worst mistake they ever made. Hardened humans stood firm, and now those humans were ready to turn the tide. The network spread like fire across dry grass. Within a month, Danny Cole was in contact with resistance groups in 32 states. Some had hundreds of fighters, some had only a dozen, but all of them shared the same goal: drive the invaders off their planet. Kevin Price's electromagnetic devices became the great equalizer. They were simple to build. A car battery, some copper wire, a few electronic parts that could be found in any hardware store. The designs spread through the network and soon every group had them. Alien walkers that once seemed unstoppable now went dark in the middle of combat. Enemy soldiers watched their weapons die in their hands. The Vrexan commanders did not understand what was happening. Their technology was supposed to be superior. Their weapons were supposed to be unmatched. Yet these primitive humans kept finding ways to neutralize their advantages. Danny received a message one evening that changed the scope of their plans. A woman's voice came through the radio, clear and steady despite the static. "This is Carol Webb calling from the Eastern Grid. I've found something important." Carol had been scouting the region around the old military bases. Most had been destroyed in the first wave of attacks, but some had emergency bunkers that survived. And in those bunkers, she found treasure. "There are 12 fighter jets in an underground hangar near Denver," Carol reported. "They're old but functional. F-16 seconds from the reserve fleet. The aliens never found them." Danny leaned toward the radio. "Can they fly?" "With some work, yes. I've already got people checking the engines. The fuel is there. The weapons are there. We just need pilots. Thanks for watching. And leverthebell.com. You're a pilot." Carol's voice carried a hint of dark humor. "I'm 63 years old and I haven't flown combat in 20 years. But yes, I can still fly. And I've found 4 others who can too." This was bigger than anything Danny had imagined. Ground attacks were one thing, but air power could change the entire war. The weeks that followed were intense. Carol assembled her team of pilots. One was a former Navy aviator who had been fishing when the invasion started. Another was a crop duster from Kansas who had flown small planes his whole life. The others were weekend hobbyists who had never seen combat but were willing to learn. Carol trained them hard. They practiced in simulators they built from spare parts. They studied the alien ships and looked for weaknesses. The Vrexan fighters were fast, but they turned slowly. Their big carriers were powerful, but not designed for atmospheric combat. There were gaps in their defenses that skilled pilots could exploit. Meanwhile, Danny coordinated the ground assault. Resistance leaders from across the country gathered at secret meeting points. They shared maps and intelligence. They picked targets. They assigned teams. The plan was simple but bold. On a single night, every resistance group in North America would attack at the same time. The electromagnetic devices would shut down alien equipment. Ground fighters would storm enemy positions, and Carol's jets would strike from above. The Vrexan forces could not be everywhere at once. If humans hit them in 100 places simultaneously, their defensive lines would collapse. Not everyone believed the plan would work. During one meeting, a resistance leader from Texas spoke his doubts. "This is suicide," he said. "We don't have the numbers. We don't have the training. Half my people have never fired a gun before last month." Danny understood his fear. He shared it. But he also knew something that the doubters did not fully grasp. "You're thinking like this is a normal war," Danny replied. "It's not. We're not trying to defeat their entire army in one battle. We're trying to break their spirit. Show them that Earth will never be safe. Make them understand that every day they stay here will cost them more than they can afford." He pointed to the map spread between them. Red marks showed alien positions. Blue marks showed human forces. They came here expecting to conquer a planet in days. It's been 2 months and they don't control anything outside the major cities. They're bleeding soldiers every week. Their reinforcements are months away. If we hit them hard enough, we can make them question whether this planet is worth the cost. The Texas leader was quiet for a moment. Then he nodded slowly. "All right, we're in. Tell us what you need." The preparations continued. Kevin Price built larger electromagnetic devices for the main assault teams. Lisa Grant stockpiled medical supplies and trained more field medics. Nick Torres monitored alien communications around the clock, mapping their patrol routes and defensive positions. The Vrexen commander grew more frustrated with each passing day. His reports to the Empire were no longer confident. He requested more troops. He requested heavier weapons. He requested permission to use orbital bombardment on civilian areas. Permission was denied. The Empire wanted Earth intact. Its resources were valuable. Its population could be used for labor. Destroying it would defeat the purpose of conquest. This limitation gave the humans an advantage they did not fully realize. The aliens were fighting with one hand tied behind their backs. They could not simply burn the planet to ash. They had to hold it. And holding a planet full of angry humans was proving far harder than expected. Danny set the date for the attack. October 15th. The night of the new moon. Maximum darkness for maximum advantage. Carol Webb flew a practice run over the mountains, testing her aircraft and her skills. The old jet responded to her touch like an old friend. She was slower than she used to be. Her reflexes were not what they were at 30. But she was still good enough. And she was angry enough. She thought about her grandchildren. They had been in Phoenix when the attack came. She did not know if they were alive or dead. She had no way to find out. All she could do was fight. Fight until the invaders were gone. Fight until the sky was safe again. On the night before the assault, Danny gathered his core team one last time. They stood outside the mining facility, looking up at the stars. Somewhere up there, alien ships orbited the planet. Somewhere up there, the enemy slept soundly, believing their victory was certain. "Tomorrow night, we show them who they're dealing with," Danny said. "We show them what humans do when our backs are against the wall. We've survived everything this planet has thrown at us for 1,000,000 years. Ice ages, plagues, wars that killed tens of millions. We're still here." He looked at each of them in turn. Lisa, with her steady hands and calm eyes. Kevin, with his brilliant mind and nervous energy. Nick, with his quiet determination. Carol, with her gray hair and iron will. "The Vrexen think they can break us. They think we'll surrender like every other species they've conquered. But they don't understand something. Humans don't break. We bend. We bleed. We lose people we love. But we don't break. Not ever." Carol smiled in the darkness. "Give them hell, Danny. We will," he promised. "We all will." Across the continent, fighters checked their weapons. Pilots ran final inspections on their aircraft. Medics prepared for the wounded. Everyone waited for midnight. The storm was coming, and when it broke, the Vrexen Empire would face something they had never encountered in all their centuries of conquest. Humanity united. Humanity fighting back. Humanity refusing to die. The invaders had dropped on Earth expecting easy prey. They were about to discover how wrong they were. The attack began at exactly midnight, October 15th. Danny Cole crouched in the darkness outside the Vrexen Regional Command Post. 40 fighters waited with him in the rocks and trees. Their faces were painted black. Their weapons were loaded, their hearts pounded with fear and fury. 200 meters away, the alien base glowed with blue lights. Guard towers stood at each corner. Patrols walked the perimeter every 15 minutes. Inside, the enemy commanders slept, believing themselves safe. They were wrong. Danny raised his hand. Then he dropped it. Kevin Price pressed the button on his electromagnetic device. The effect was instant. The blue lights flickered and died. The guard towers went dark. Alien soldiers stumbled as their armor support systems failed. Weapons that had hummed with power went silent. Danny opened fire. 40 guns roared together. Tracer rounds lit up the darkness. The Vrexen guards fell before they understood what was happening. Human fighters surged forward, screaming battle cries that had been heard on 1,000 battlefields throughout history. The aliens tried to regroup. They were trained soldiers, disciplined and coordinated. But their technology had betrayed them. Without their advanced weapons, they were slower and weaker than the humans charging toward them. Danny led the assault through the main gate. An alien soldier swung at him with a blade. Danny ducked and drove his rifle butt into the creature's throat. The alien went down choking. Danny kept moving. Lisa Grant followed close behind with her medical bag. A young fighter named Pete took a hit and collapsed. Lisa grabbed him by the vest and dragged him behind a wall. The wound was bad but not fatal. She pressed bandages to his side and injected painkillers. "Stay down," she ordered. "I'll be back for you." Then she picked up Pete's rifle and rejoined the fight. Kevin Price moved through the base with a small team, looking for the main generator. If they could destroy it, the base would be crippled permanently. They found it in a reinforced building at the center of the compound. 4 alien guards stood watch. Kevin's device had drained their weapons, but the guards still had blades. They were tall and fast, despite their fragile bodies. Kevin's team engaged them in close combat. It was brutal and bloody. One human went down with a blade in his shoulder. Another took a cut across his face. But humans were stronger. Humans were tougher. And humans were fighting for their home. Kevin reached the generator while his team held off the guards. He planted explosives he had built himself. Simple, but effective. Fuel and fertilizer packed into metal containers. "Move!" he shouted. They ran. Behind them, the generator exploded in a ball of orange flame. The entire base shook. Secondary explosions followed as fuel stores caught fire. Danny heard the blast and smiled grimly. One objective down. Dozens more across the continent. 500 miles away, Carol Webb pushed her throttle forward. Her F-16 screamed through the darkness at 600 miles per hour. Behind her, 4 other jets followed in tight formation. Their target was a Vrexen carrier hovering over Kansas. The ship was 2 miles long and bristling with weapons. It had destroyed entire military bases during the invasion. Tonight, it would fall. Carol's pilots were not trained combat aviators. They were farmers and mechanics and weekend flyers who had learned to fight in 8 weeks of desperate training, but they flew with courage that training could never provide. "Stay tight," Carol said over the radio. "Hit the engines like we practiced. Get out before their fighters respond." The carrier grew larger in her canopy. Its hull was smooth and gray, covered with weapons that could vaporize her jet in seconds. But those weapons needed power, and the carrier's defensive grid had a gap in its coverage where the engine exhaust vented. Carol armed her missiles. Her hands were steady. Her heart was calm. She had known this might be a one-way mission. She had accepted that the moment she climbed into the cockpit. "Weapons hot," she announced. "Beginning attack run." The carrier's point defense systems opened fire. Bright beams of energy sliced through the air. One of Carol's pilots banked hard to avoid a hit. Another was not so lucky. His jet exploded in a fireball that lit up the night sky. Carol did not flinch. She could not afford to. She pushed through the defensive fire, her jet shaking with near misses. The engine exhaust grew larger in her sights. She fired. 2 missiles streaked toward the carrier. They punched through the exhaust vent and detonated inside the engine chamber. The carrier shuddered. Fire erupted from the wound, but it was not enough. The ship was too big. It would survive. Carol made her decision in less than a second. "All units break off," she ordered. "Get clear now." Then, she aimed her jet directly at the damaged engine and pushed the throttle to maximum. The other pilots screamed at her to pull up. She ignored them. Her jet closed the distance in heartbeats. At the last moment, she thought about her grandchildren. She hoped they were alive. She hoped they would grow up in a free world. The impact was tremendous. Carol's jet penetrated deep into the engine chamber before exploding. The blast triggered a chain reaction that tore through the carrier's power systems. The massive ship broke apart, pieces falling like meteors across the Kansas plains. On the ground, human fighters watched the burning wreckage fall from the sky. They cheered and wept at the same time. They knew someone had given everything to make this happen. Carol Webb died at 63 years old, taking an alien warship with her. She died as she had lived, fighting. By dawn, the scope of the attack became clear. Resistance groups had struck 117 targets across North America. 32 alien bases were destroyed or heavily damaged. Thousands of Vrexan soldiers were dead. Equipment losses were catastrophic. Danny Cole stood in the ruins of the command post they had captured. His people moved through the wreckage, collecting weapons and supplies. The cost had been high. They had lost 12 fighters in the assault. Lisa Grant had saved 9 more, who would have died without her care. But they had won. This battle, at least, they had won. Nick Torres ran toward Danny with a captured communication device. "You need to hear this," Nick said, his voice tight with emotion. Danny listened. The Vrexan commander's voice came through, speaking to his superiors in orbit. Nick translated in real time. Massive losses across all sectors. Human resistance far exceeds projections. Request immediate reinforcement. Request permission to withdraw to defensible positions. These creatures are not primitives. They are something far more dangerous. They are warriors. Danny turned off the device. Around him, his fighters gathered. They were bloody and exhausted. Some were wounded. All were changed by what they had done. "They're scared," Danny said. "They came here thinking we would be easy. Now they know the truth. Earth belongs to us, and we will never stop fighting until every last one of them is gone." The sun rose over the mountains, painting the sky in shades of red and gold. Smoke drifted from a dozen battlefields across the continent. The war was not over. It had barely begun, but the tide had turned. The invaders who dropped from the sky had met something they never expected. Hardened humans who refused to break. And in that refusal, humanity found its greatest strength. Carol Webb was gone. But her sacrifice would not be forgotten. Every human who looked at the burning sky that morning knew what she had done. And every one of them swore to honor her memory. By fighting on. By never surrendering. By making the invaders pay for every inch of ground. The night of fire was over. The war for Earth continued. The Vrexan High Command faced a crisis they had never experienced in 300 years of conquest. Reports flooded in from every region of the planet. Human attacks continued day and night. Patrols vanished without trace. Supply convoys were ambushed on every road. Even the cities they controlled had become death traps. Snipers fired from ruined buildings. Bombs exploded under their vehicles. Soldiers who stepped outside their bases often did not return. Reinforcements were months away. The nearest Vrexan fleet was engaged in operations across the galaxy. Earth had been expected to fall quickly. No one had planned for a war of this scale. The Vrexan general sat in his command ship, staring at the latest casualty figures. In 3 months of occupation, he had lost more soldiers than the previous 5 conquests combined. His junior officers no longer met his eyes. His communications with the Empire grew more tense with each report. Then something happened that had never occurred in Vrexan history. A human voice came through their military frequencies, clear and strong, and speaking in their own language. "This is Danny Cole, speaking for the free people of Earth." The general froze. His officers scrambled to trace the signal. It came from somewhere in the mountains, bouncing through a dozen relay points they could not track. Danny continued speaking. Nick Torres had taught him enough Vrexan words to deliver this message. "You came to our world expecting to find weak creatures who would surrender. You were wrong. Earth is not a conquest. Earth is a grave for invaders. Every soldier you send will die. Every ship you land will burn. You have fought us for 3 months. You have lost thousands of your people. And we have barely started. The general listened with growing unease. We know what you think of us, Danny said. Primitives. Animals. Prey. But you have never fought a species like us. Humans have been at war with each other for 10,000 years. We have invented more ways to kill than you can imagine. We have survived disasters that destroyed entire civilizations. We are still here. And we will never stop fighting. His voice hardened. Leave our world now. Go back to your empire and tell them what you found here. Tell them that Earth is defended. Tell them that humans cannot be conquered. Or stay and die. The choice is yours. The transmission ended. The general sat in silence for a long moment. Then he did something his officers had never seen. He called for a strategic withdrawal. The Vrexan forces pulled back to defensible positions. They abandoned outposts across the countryside. They concentrated their remaining troops in the largest cities. Building walls and checkpoints and defensive grids, they were no longer trying to conquer Earth. They were trying to survive long enough for reinforcements to arrive. But humans did not give them time. Danny coordinated the final assault through Nick's communication network. Resistance groups converged on the remaining alien strongholds from every direction. They came with weapons captured from enemy dead. They came with electromagnetic devices that killed alien technology. They came with the fury of a species fighting for its existence. The battle for Denver lasted 3 days. Street by street, building by building, human fighters pushed the aliens back. Kevin Price led a team that disabled the enemy's main defense grid. Without it, Vrexan soldiers were exposed in the open. They fell by the hundreds. Lisa Grant worked around the clock, saving lives in a makeshift hospital set up in a parking garage. Her hands were covered in blood. Her eyes burned from exhaustion. But she kept working. Every life she saved was another fighter who would rejoin the battle. In New York, resistance fighters emerged from the subway tunnels and attacked the alien garrison from below. In Los Angeles, a coordinated assault by thousands of civilians overwhelmed enemy positions through sheer numbers. In Houston, a group of oil workers used tanker trucks as rolling bombs, driving them into alien defensive positions and leaping clear before impact. The Vrexan commander watched his empire crumble. He requested permission to use orbital bombardment. Permission was denied again. He requested permission to withdraw to orbit and abandon the surface. Permission was granted. The alien retreat began on a cold morning in late December. Danny Cole stood on a hillside and watched enemy transports rise into the sky. They lifted from the burning cities, carrying soldiers who had survived the human counterattack. Their formation was ragged. Their ships were damaged. They moved with the desperate speed of creatures fleeing for their lives. Lisa stood beside him. So did Kevin and Nick, and dozens of fighters who had survived the war. They watched in silence as the invaders left. "They're really going," Kevin said. "I didn't think they would actually leave." "They had no choice," Danny replied. "We broke them. Not their ships or their weapons. We broke their will to fight." Nick held a captured communication device. He listened to the Vrexan channels as the enemy fleet gathered in orbit. "They're sending a warning beacon," Nick reported. "Broadcasting to their whole empire. It says Earth is designated hostile. No further colonization attempts recommended. The native species is too dangerous to subjugate." Danny laughed. It was the first real laugh he had heard in months. Around him, others joined in. The sound echoed across the hillside, mixing with the distant rumble of alien engines. The Vrexan fleet formed up above the atmosphere. They had come with dreams of easy conquest. They left with warnings and nightmares. The species they had dismissed as primitives had fought them to a standstill and then driven them away. Some of them would spend the rest of their lives wondering how it happened, how creatures without faster-than-light travel, without energy weapons, without any of the technology that defined galactic civilization, had defeated an empire that spanned 3 galaxies. The answer was simple. Humans did not quit. On the ground, Danny watched the last ships disappear into the darkness of space. The war was over. Earth had paid a terrible price. Cities lay in ruins. Millions were dead. The world would never be the same, but they had won. Lisa put her hand on Danny's shoulder. What happens now? Danny thought about the question. There was so much work to do. Cities to rebuild, survivors to care for, a planet to heal, and somewhere out there, an empire that might come back someday. We rebuild, he said. We get stronger. We make sure that if anyone ever tries this again, they'll face something even worse. He looked at the people around him. Farmers and mechanics and teachers who had become soldiers. Ordinary people who had done extraordinary things. They had stood firm when the sky fell. They had turned the tide when all seemed lost. And we remember, Danny added. We remember Carol. And everyone else who gave their lives. We remember what we learned about ourselves. When everything fell apart, we came together. We fought as one species, one people, one world. That's something the Vrexen never understood. They saw us divided and thought we were weak. They didn't realize that when we face a common enemy, we become something unstoppable. The sun rose over the mountains. The first sunrise of a free Earth. Danny watched the light spread across the land, touching the ruins and the forests, and the places where battles had been fought. Somewhere in the galaxy, the Vrexen Empire received the warning beacon. High commanders reviewed the reports and decided that Earth was not worth the cost. They marked it on their maps as forbidden territory, a world where even the mightiest conquerors had failed. Humans did not know about this decision, but they would have understood it. They had proven something that no other species in the galaxy had demonstrated. They could not be broken. They could not be conquered. They would fight with everything they had, from the first day to the last, no matter the odds. Danny Cole looked at the sky where the enemy had vanished. He thought about the future. Humanity would reach for the stars someday. They would build ships and explore the galaxy and meet other species. Some would be friends, some would be enemies. And when they met enemies, humans would remember this war. They would remember that they had faced annihilation and refused to accept it. They would remember that ordinary people had become heroes when their world needed them. The Vrexen had dropped on Earth expecting to find easy prey. Instead, they found something far more dangerous. They found humanity. Hardened, stubborn, unbreakable humanity. And humanity had stood firm and turned the tide. The war was over. But the story was just beginning.